Do you guys remember in Little Big Planet 2's video that I said most sequels manage to improve upon their predecessor? Y'all remember that? I said usually a game learns from their first outing and makes an even better game the second time around. Bioshock 2 is that exception. Oh man, this fucking game. You know, this is like the equivalent of what happened in Final Fantasy 13-2, in which a sequel isn't needed. Or like a YouTube auditor fucking himself with 2 dildos. Completely unnecessary. All you needed was one, motherfucker. Now, as I said in yesterday's video, Bioshock was video game gold. It was the rare and unique and original story that managed to create a world and characters that you actually gave 2 fucks about. You knew the Big Daddy was a badass. You knew that Ryan and Fontaine were evil motherfuckers, and you had a choice of saving the little sisters or harvesting and killing them. Games this original only come around so often. Half-Life is one. The Last of Us certainly falls into that category. Probably the original Halo. Maybe you throw in Red Dead Redemption into that conversation of original games that leave an amazing last impression that weren't sequels, that were original games before the sequel started. However, Bioshock did not need a sequel. The ending gave you your closure. You either saved the little sisters or you harvested them, and it gave the accounts of what happened afterwards. Andrew Ryan was gone, Frank LaFontaine was gone, and your character Jack was shown dying either a peaceful or empty death at the end of the game. And yes, I just spoiled everything in this video, but obviously we're talking about a fucking sequel here, so we're gonna have to talk about some shit that happened in the first game. So honestly, why the fuck do you need a sequel? Oh, that's right, money. Why relish in the fact you just created one of the most fantastic games of a generation and just let it be when you can pimp that motherfucker out for more money? This game wasn't created by Irrational Games either. No. Take-Two, a very conscious developer about desensitizing people with too many sequels, decided this would be the game to pimp out. Really? And they gave it to another studio that only partially helped with the first game in 2K Mara. Now, Irrational didn't do any work on Bioshock 2, and it shows. When you compare their 2 games, Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite, you see the difference compared to this game. And what's really sad is this isn't a bad game. Matter of fact, it's actually pretty good. The combat system is a little bit better, but part of that is being the Big Daddy this time around. The storyline is a little bit on the bullshit side, but nothing like a Final Fantasy sequel. And the improvements were actually somewhat decent. The problem is, this just isn't a good sequel. It has virtually no connection to the first game, and personally, I don't even think it should have been called Bioshock 2, since it has little resemblance to Bioshock other than it takes place in Rapture and you're using Rapture's characters. Essentially, that's the biggest flaw in the story and narrative. This isn't a game that gives closure to an existing character. This game was made to give the city Rapture its closure. This isn't a game that serves as a sequel or a prequel, direct sequel to the story where we're presented with the original game. No, it's basically a game that gives its silent character the closure it deserved. The title of this game should not be Bioshock 2. The title of this game should be called Rapture. If you want to call it Bioshock and then put a little parentheses, Rapture next to it, call it that. But this game should not, at any point, be considered a sequel to the original Bioshock or be called Bioshock 2. In playing the first game, you see that the city was an amazing idea, from the artwork, the level design, to the use of the city being underwater, constant changes because of potential flooding. Bioshock created a beautiful world that felt like its own character. It nailed the time period from the 50s and 60s and showed how grim the place had become after the citizens went apeshit after taking too many drugs. See kids, drugs are really bad up in this motherfucker. But anyway, at the end of the first game, you had no idea what happened to Rapture in the aftermath. This game tells you what happens to Rapture. It puts you inside the iconic Big Daddy suit, and it gives you a purpose. Find your little sister. You take control of a Big Daddy that was forced to commit suicide 10 years earlier, and now you've come back to life 8 years after the events of Bioshock to save your little sister. The Big Daddy you're in control of is the first Big Daddy to fully bond with a little sister. In other words, the experiments to make you a mindless zombie whose mission is to protect your little sister worked on you first. You are the first one that it worked on. See? That's a compelling story on its own, but you're following it up to one of the best stories ever told in a video game. And you're using the coattails of Bioshock's popularity, using the world that was created in Bioshock to make your game. Because let's be honest, without the world of Bioshock, and in particular without the elements of the city of Rapture, would this game work? Storyline is pretty good. but you need Rapture to make the story work, and that's the ultimate flaw in this game. You wrapped a pretty good story around the city that was already used, yet it has no ties to the original character. It makes a few references here and there. It brings back Dr. Tenenbaum or whatever the fuck she used to start all this bullshit in the first place. So this is more of a spin-off than a sequel. It's not a sequel. It doesn't match anything in a sequel, yet it's numbered like a sequel. The main bad guy is a deranged woman who wants power. Essentially, it feels like the first game, only this time around, you know who's bad from the start, where the original keeps you in the dark most of the game. You get a different bad guy this time around called the Big Sisters, who are agile, cranky bitches. Oh man, they fuck up the Big Daddy something fierce with their speed, and it's like they're constantly on their periods or something. They're always in a bad mood. That's the best way to describe it. But anyway, this game still has the morality issue as before. Your decision to save or harvest the Little Sisters, and it's actually going to affect the eventual ending of the game, which, by the way, again, is a damn good ending to a game. It's a sad as shit ending, but it's an excellent ending, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But when you look at the story as a whole, what character gets the ultimate closure in this game? Rapture. That's it. You don't give two shits about Eleanor until the end of the game. You don't care about the Big Daddy Delta himself until the end. Sophia Lamb is a fucking cunt, so you could care less about her. But the star of the show is and will always be Rapture. And it gets destroyed. Yep, the main star of the game gets its closure as Rapture is fully destroyed. Eleanor chooses to save Sophia Lamb, and knowing that Delta won't survive, she absorbs his mind and memories. Delta fought tooth and nail to keep her alive and give her a free life, and he had to give his own to do so. Meanwhile, that bitch Sophia Lamb survived. Oh, that fucking twat didn't even have the stones to face you in the finale either. That final battle, man, is just a mashup of all the enemies in the game fighting you at one time. Basically, you have to sit there and just survive a 2-minute onslaught of all the fucking enemies in the game. That's definitely no Fontaine fight, man. There's no evil genius. It's just the same shit you faced in the game as a Big Daddy, where you kick the fuck out of everything because you're a badass. Now you just have to face them all at one fucking time. Ooh, big fucking deal, man. You know, the final sequence of this game is the best part of the entire story. But, much like Bioshock Infinite, for this to be considered a great game, it really depends on its finale, its final cutscene to elevate this game. The original Bioshock didn't need a magnificent ending to make that story great. Matter of fact, the ending, the original, isn't as good as the two games that came after it. But the game itself, its story, its characters, that made it memorable. When you play the original Bioshock for the first time and you wander around Rapture and you see the details the developers put into the world, it's amazing. However, going back a second time, that wow factor you got from the first game, it's gone. That holy shit feel is tempered because you've seen it before. Granted, you get to play as a Big Daddy this time around, but the charm of the first game doesn't carry over to the second game, mainly because we've seen it before. And I love playing as the Big Daddy, man. But it kind of defeats that moment of feeling vulnerable. Not for nothing, but a low-level splicer is not going to stand a chance against you. Even the big brute splicer shouldn't stand a chance because you're a fucking walking tank. As fun as it is to play as Big Daddy, you should beat the shit out of pretty much everything in this game pretty easily, with the exception of a Big Sister. Those moments of invincibility really take away from the actual gameplay just as much as the first game, where those moments of stupidity from the Big Daddy take away from that game. Now, one final thing I have to mention in this video, and that's the multiplayer portion of the shit. When 2K announced they had a multiplayer, man, he thought they were just tacking the shit on to make money or compete with other shooter games. I thought that same shit myself. First-person shooter games have multiplayer, so why can't we? I didn't think they would tie this into anything, but surprisingly, they used the backstory of how the citizens went crazy and started the Civil War before the events of Bioshock, so it actually does tie in the story pretty well. I like that part. I like that they used this as a bit of a prequel to show how the backstory progresses. The problem is the multiplayer is completely unbalanced. Part of that is the plasmids or the magic powers, whatever you want to call it. You know, you get shit like fire, ice, water, bees! Motherfucking bees, man! You can throw bees at a motherfucker. I ain't into that shit, man. Anyway, as you rank up, you get to use more plasmids. You get stronger. You get things like Fire 2, Fire 3, Ice 2, Ice 3. But the problem is that lower ranked players won't see that until they rank up. Essentially, the game punishes new players and rewards experienced players way too unfairly. You know, this isn't like Call of Duty where you rank up and you get a different gun or you get a different perk that can be countered. The very first guns you get in Call of Duty are just as equal to the very last guns you get. Here, if I have Fire 1 and you have Fire 3, that's a huge advantage. Granted, People who play longer should have some extra goodies, and I don't mind that portion one bit, but the balance of the goodies should still keep things even. I can't compete with someone with more plasmids, higher rank plasmids, higher rank guns. It's not possible. So for people who were new to the online portion, it quickly became a turnoff because you stood absolutely no chance against higher rank players. I like the idea that 2K Marin came up with and tying it to the actual events of Bioshock, because like I said, I thought it was just a tacked on portion. I like that they do have different game modes, and I get that a citizen of a city who uses more plasmids is bound to get stronger and more deranged, but it doesn't make for a good, balanced multiplayer element. It's just far too unbalanced to play. If you didn't get in on the multiplayer when the game first came out, you are bound to get the shit kicked out of you until you're fully ranked up to be able to at least compete at a balanced level with other players. To me, that's not a balanced multiplayer. You have to be able to have a chance at the lowest level compared to the highest level, and this game gives you absolutely no chance other than trying to find the Big Daddy suit on the goddamn map. That, to me, is completely unbalanced. Anyways, that does it for Bioshock 2, and tomorrow will be the final Bioshock game in the series, and that will be Bioshock Infinite. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.